Welcome to Nalani Live. I'm Nalani Jenkins, and I'm a candidate for Honolulu City Council, District 6. First of all, I want to thank everyone who's on Zoom, who's watching, also on social media live platforms. We are going to have a great Nalani Live episode for you this evening. And before we get started, I just want to give you a little bit of context as to why we're doing Nalani Live. So like I explained, I'm running for Honolulu City Council District 6. And one of the things I believe in passionately is that anyone who's running for elective office and serving needs to be a representative of the people. They're not there for special interests. And so I'm not running for any other reason, but just to serve the people of District 6. I have a goal to be the best communicator of anyone who's served in this seat. So this is one way to kick off our campaign and to be able to communicate with the people who live in District 6, the residents, and to be able to focus on things that they care about. We're going to be talking about all kinds of issues. We've been walking around and talking to people throughout the district. And depending on where you are in District 6, it's interesting because we're a very diverse district, and yet the same issues are coming up. So tonight we're going to be talking about crime and crime in Honolulu specifically. I was in Chinatown talking to a few of the people that live there, some people who work there, some of the community leaders, and I heard different stories. One person told me that he's recently moved to Chinatown from the Windward side, and he doesn't even feel safe taking his daughter to the little park that's across from their condo at night because of crime and homelessness issues. Another person who's dealt with crime in Chinatown for decades and just said he's had such a passion for speaking up and speaking out about it, and yet it doesn't seem to change. Nothing seems to get better. So we're gonna ask a few questions. We've got some great guests that I'm going to introduce to you in a minute, but here's the question. Is crime getting worse, and why? People I've talked to believe it is. The types of crimes and the organizations or the people behind the crimes seem to be changing. So it's not just the fact that there's crime or there's more crime, but the type of crime is changing. And the impression is in a lot of people that I've spoken with is that violent crime is on the rise. So it's not just crime, but violent crime. And that's a big concern. We also want to touch on the issues of mental health and how they're related to crimes. And a recent story comes to mind about the man in Kapolei who was released from the police station there. And just outside the door of the police station, right after he was released, he killed a homeless woman right outside the police station. And I think many people in Hawaii were just struck by what a tragedy that was, but just like, how is it that that's happening in our city and in our towns? Another issue was the tragic shooting and murder in Waikiki just a few days ago. And so that brings us to this episode of Nalani Live and why we're going to be talking about crime on the rise. Let me introduce my first guest, Mike Kitchens. Welcome.
Aloha. Thank you so much for having me.
Mike is the CEO of BTT Inc. I'm going to ask him to explain that a little bit in a minute. He's a U.S. Air Force veteran, the creator and admin of Stolen Stuff Hawaii, which I know many people are familiar with, and they're members of that group. It's on Facebook and Instagram, and he was a 2021 Police Week Outstanding Citizen of the Year Award by HPD.
Thank you.
We have another guest, Megan Kao. Megan's on Zoom with us. Aloha, Megan. Megan has a law degree from Santa Clara and an accounting degree from UH Manoa. She's a trial attorney And her practice areas include civil litigation, personal injury, select felony criminal matters, and mainly white-collar crime cases, homicides, and sexual assaults. Her unique background as a certified public accountant and an attorney, I think, gives her great insights in her role, and has a very strong trial background. So she has been the deputy prosecuting attorney for the city and county of Honolulu, and then worked for 2 mid-sized civil litigation firms, and was a candidate for city prosecutor in 2020. Megan, welcome. Got a wave from Megan. All right, so I'm going to start off, and Megan, I'm going to get to you in just a minute, and I'd like you to share your background as well. But I'm going to start with Mike. Mike, can you tell us what BTT is and tell us a little bit about the project?
Well, BTT stands for Build the Track, and essentially what I'm doing right now is developing a new motorsports facility to replace the one that was closed in Hawaii in 2006. We've been over 15 years without a racetrack, and it's something that I think is very important.
Wow, where is that going to be located?
We're focusing on the Campbell Industrial Area, and properly zoned, which is appropriate for it.
All right, interesting. And okay, I know everybody's really like interested in this. What is the history of Stolen Stuff Hawaii? And how, first of all, how did you get that started? But also, I think I read somewhere that it has 179,000 members, or over that probably now, in your Facebook and Instagram combined.
It's actually up to 190,000 actually now. So
wow,
it's been quite successful. It originated in 2014 when my brother-in-law had his van stolen. He was a landscaper at the time and built up like 10, 11 years worth of tools, and they were gone in an instant. And I just felt social media was so powerful. How can I put this out there to help? And that's where I got the idea from.
Wow, really great. So tell me, what types of crimes, because you know that's the main topic of our show, what types of crimes are you seeing on Stolen Stuff Hawaii?
It runs the gamut of allowed crime. We've had everything from, having somebody's antenna ball stolen and reported on the page to, violent crime of all different types. So it really, if you could try and put your finger on the pulse of what's happening in our community, SSH is where you would go.
Okay. And so just from your perspective, are you noticing that crime is on the rise in Hawaii?
Well, statistically, you'll hear no, but I think there is a marked perception that there has been an increase. We had this little bit of I would say not an absence, but a lull in crime during the pandemic. But since then, I feel like when I wake up in the morning, I check the group, and it seems massively that there's just a noticeable difference. And we've seen that in headlines and articles as of late as well. So,
what kind of trends are you seeing?
Increase in property theft, an increase in violent crime.
Wow. Okay, great. This is going to be great to launch off of for our conversation. Megan. There we go.
Hi, good evening.
Hello. Welcome to NalaniLIVE. So excited to have you on the show. Mike just gave you a little shaka. So
hi, Mike.
Hi, Megan.
Megan, same question to you. Are you noticing crime on the rise in Hawaii?
Yeah, actually, during the election, I had a commercial that says crime is on the rise. I mean, I had a picture of that burglary at the Texaco on School Street where the guy used a gun to hold up, she was actually my auntie, and take cash from the store. I attribute this to lack of prosecution, which is partly why I decided to run in 2020. The prior administration had stopped charging low-level crimes, or was taking the position that low-level crimes shouldn't be charged for various reasons. And I was explaining to people in the community that when you don't hold people accountable for smaller crimes that are property crimes, they get braver, they get brazen, and the next time they commit a property crime, or the 20th time they commit a property crime, now they're going to use violence against someone that tries to stop them because they have been emboldened by the criminal justice system. So what we're seeing right now is a result of lack of prosecution.
Yeah, that's in our district, by the way. District 6, where I'm running for city council, starts at Middle Street and it goes all the way to Ward Avenue. But that School Street, Texaco, I'm very familiar with where you're talking about. And I mean, that's so close to home. And I think that's what's really concerning for a lot of people that we're talking to. Megan, could you share a little bit about your insights and your experience as it applies to crime in Hawaii in general? And we're going to get into some of these topics, Megan, but just any kind of a broad overview of what you've seen in your career to date.
Well, I'll explain what I've seen in my career as a deputy prosecuting attorney, which is why I take the position that you have to charge all crimes, including property crimes, including assaultive nature crimes, including fraud. It's because, you know, when I was a deputy prosecuting attorney, I prosecuted charges like UCPV, which is unauthorized control of a propelled vehicle. And most people would say, who cares, right? Who cares if someone steals your car and is driving your car? I mean, no one's been hurt. Insurance could probably cover the cost of the car. And so there's not really repercussions. But a victim would say, well, I couldn't get to work. I had to catch the bus. I couldn't take my kids to school. That's my only mode of transportation. I can't afford another car. So there are reasons why we should prosecute those types of cases. And there's a jury instruction that goes out to the jury that if the suspect, the defendant, the person that's charged, believes that the registered owner gave permission to drive the car, then the jury will be instructed that they have to find the defendant not guilty because it's based on this reasonable belief that he or she had permission to drive the car. But this can be combated if you're a trial attorney. You can cross-examine the defendant. Where did you get the keys? Who did you meet with? Where did you meet? What does the person look like? How did that person get the keys? I mean, there's ways to cross-examine a defendant to show that he or she is not credible. So the jury does find people guilty of UCPV. Unfortunately, the prior administration took the position that we don't want to take that chance of losing, and so we're just not going to charge these crimes. This is what led to the escalation. And now in the past 2 weeks, I think we've seen 5 shootings. I mean, I don't think I'm exaggerating, but I think there was 4 or 5 or 6 shootings or some type of attempted murder or murder in the past 2 weeks. Now, what I've also seen as part of the pandemic is, I understand, as Mike just said, the statistics show that crime is not necessarily on the rise, but there are various reasons for those statistics. Example number 1, victim calls 911, 911 answers, but no police officers show up, and so no police report is made. Example number 2, victims are victimized, they call 911, HPD arrives, but the police officers talk them out of making a complaint. And I'm not making this up. I've seen it happen. I've been the victim of a case where that's happened. I've seen it as a prosecutor. People call me on a daily basis saying that this is happening. And so these statistics are skewed. I mean, there's no way to make up for those cases that are just not being charged.
No, agreed. And so really great insights. We're going to start digging in on some key points. Mike, did you have anything to add to that? What Megan was talking about just the experience that you've seen in the last few years?
I mean, since I've started in 2014, I have seen it rise. And we've been saying over and over again in our group, Megan's been online with me in our own lives, and we've discussed it. And we've basically, this is the gathering storm that's finally breaking across the island. I think it's obvious. I mean, it's happening because there has been a lack of accountability. I think that's really the root of what we're dealing with here.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that too in a minute. I think people are concerned because this is our island home, and Honolulu, you know, in a lot of cases has always felt like it couldn't happen here, right? Things like what happened at the Kapolei police station. and things that we're seeing now, and like what Megan's talking about, just in a couple of weeks, all of these shootings and really just violent crime. We don't want to turn into another city like what we're seeing happen on the mainland. So this is a great chance for us to have the conversation and maybe bring some issues to light. So Megan, I'm going to throw this back to you, and I'm going to ask you about the legal process. If you could explain for me and the folks who are watching about pre-trial release and bonds.
Sure. So let's talk about two types of crimes, okay? We're going to talk about non-felony crimes, which are misdemeanors and below. So anything that's punishable by up to a maximum of 1 year in jail. And then the second category we're going to talk about is felonies, because these two types of cases are treated very differently. So in district court, we deal with petty misdemeanors, which is 30 days in jail, and misdemeanors, which is maximum of 1 year in jail. And the pretrial bail process is very quick in district court. The person is arrested. If they're not released on their own recognizance by HPD, then they have to come to court. Release on your own recognizance means that HPD looks at your record, they look at the type of crime, the facts and circumstances of the situation, and if in their view you should be released because you'll come back to court, you'll be released on your own recognizance, and you do not have to stay in custody, and you can come back to court when required to do so. If you are not ROR'd, which is released on recognizance, then you have to go to court. And at your first court hearing, the district court judge will determine whether or not you're going to be released. And that's going to depend on many factors. Do you have a criminal record? Do you have contempt of court arrests and or convictions? What are the facts and circumstances of this case? Are they assaultive in nature? Is there a victim? Do you have a place to go to? Even if you're homeless, do you have a place to go to where you can be contacted by your public defender? Are you going to keep in contact with your public defender? So these are all the factors that the district court considers when deciding whether or not to release a misdemeanor or petty misdemeanor pretrial detainee. Bail is typically set at less than $2,000. If the court believes that you are a risk, then the court will set a bail amount typically less than $2,000. What that means is the defendant has to post either the $2,000 or the bail amount, or get a bond if possible, in order to be released from custody. If the defendant cannot post that amount, then he or she has to remain in custody until the trial begins. For custody cases in district court, those that we're talking about, trials are within 2 or 3 days. They're immediate, because we don't want to hold the defendant in custody for a lengthy amount of time if the person is not able to bail out. And so when the defendant comes to court, he or she decides if they're going to plead guilty and say, I admit doing it, and get sentenced, or if they're going to plead not guilty and ask for a judge trial. So that's basically the pretrial release system in district court. Should I move on to the felony?
So that's a lot of good information. I'm going to ask Mike to chime in too, but this is a dialogue between the three of us. But what are the implications of this process? So Megan just described, here's how it works, but what are we seeing the impact on the people who are victims of these crimes?
Well, a large majority of these people are habitual offenders. They're people that continuously, when they're released, they continuously do crime. I mean, granted, you do have, a lot of first timers, but I think overall, and I'm not sure if Megan can back me up on this, but I think that there's a lot of people that know what they're doing when it comes to habitual property crime, violence, things of that nature. They have a tendency to do it and do it and do it until they're stopped. And these, the only thing stopping them from doing that is when they're given a proper bail amount that keeps them from the community. Because it takes a long time for them to get to serve justice through our judicial system, innocent or guilty. It takes a long time for them to get processed. And I'm sure Megan can answer a little bit to that as well. So,
Megan, correct me if I'm wrong, but was there something that's before the I think it's a state ledge now with the ACLU that's saying that everyone who is arrested is going to be released, that's their goal for everyone arrested. Is that correct?
It's slightly correct. Yes, there is a bill in front of the legislature, and what they're proposing to do is automatically release people that have been arrested for certain named crimes, property crimes, non-violent crimes, theft. You know, the problem is we have a separation of powers for a reason. The legislature should not step on the justice system's toes. It is the judge who is in the best position to determine whether a single individual, whatever the crime may be, whatever his or her background may be, it's that judge is in the best place to decide whether this person should be released or not released. The legislature should not rule from afar, you know, from the Capitol and say, hey, judge, you should let this person go. It's a violation of the separation of powers. But beyond that, it's problematic because we see people that steal all the time. You know, why should they get to go just because that theft charge is included in this statute that says, hey, you don't have to post bail. You can just come back to court whenever you please. I mean, realistically, that doesn't happen. We have to hold people accountable. We have to set bail or conditions so that the person does return to court.
So true. So just to be clear for the folks that are listening to this conversation, I'm a candidate for Honolulu City Council, right? So there's the state and then there's the city. So certain things that we talk about, like on the state ledge side, the legislature, it would not necessarily be an issue that I would be directly involved in, right? I think what we're trying to do with the NalaniLIVE podcast is to bring these issues to light, right? So that the community can hear them and they can weigh in. But one thing that the city council members do influence is Honolulu Police Department. And so we can talk a little bit about that. And, you know, it's been a lot in the news lately that there's over 300 unfilled vacancies. And we all know that the police chief has been, that seat has been vacant for quite a while now. I'd like to ask both of you, Michael, we'll start with you, and then Megan, I'd like to hear from you too, but how do we support our police officers and yet manage these problems about all these unfilled vacancies? What's the cause? And what are some ideas that we should be doing?
I think there's a lot of variables. That's a very difficult task that you're asking about. First of all, there's the perception. You know, right now, who would want to be an officer? You know, when they have this revolving door crime where they see these criminals who are arrested and are put back on the street. You know, I talk to a lot of officers through private messaging, phone calls, that sort of thing. And I get a lot of feedback, and it can be very frustrating for them. Their morale can be spectacularly high. They believe in their job, but to constantly deal with this revolving door hurts them. So I think one of the first things we have to do is ensure that our officers here are appreciated, and they are compared to the mainland. Actually, our officers are greatly appreciated, much greater than some of the places on the mainland, for example. But we need to continue to do that, and we need to make sure that their job, I think, first of all, that it pays them well enough to justify what they go through, what they have to deal with, that they receive the amount of training that they need. And like I said, there's so many variables, but I think it really starts there. We've got to keep them from wanting to go to the mainland. Hawaii is expensive to live here. And, you know, if you can get a better paying job somewhere else with the training that you have, and HPD officers are trained very well, you know, it's really hard to keep them from going.
Yeah. And that's something I'm really passionate about too, is that we don't want to lose good quality people because they can't afford to live in Hawaii, or that the system is just so difficult for them to do their job. So I totally agree with you on that, Mike. What are your thoughts, Megan, on the unfilled vacancies of both the officers and the police chief?
My opinion is that everything comes from the top. everything, including the environment, the morale, discipline, work ethic, everything flows from the top. And so we need to get a chief of police that's going to be able to lead our department in the right direction, be ethical, be fiscally sound, and support the officers. That's a huge factor. We need a chief of police that's going to support our police officers on the ground. I'm talking about sergeants and below, the footmen, you know. So the other thing where you may have say is the budget. You know, the city council runs the budget for both the prosecuting attorney's office and for HPD. And I think that the budgets need to be looked at, not to defund the police, but to start funding other programs that will alleviate police officers' duties. For example, and to no fault of their own, and I'm a huge supporter of all of the police officers in our department, but they are just not trained to deal with people that suffer from schizoaffective disorder, schizophrenia, bipolar. I mean, these are diseases that we are seeing that are extremely prevalent in our community, more so than they were 20 years ago. And you've got to be trained in dealing with these people, even the way you approach the person, the way you talk to someone. You know, as a defense attorney, I get to oversee a lot of, or not oversee, but I get to view a lot of body cam footage. I get to see how the officers talk to people that are suffering from mental health disorders. And to no fault of their own, they're just not trained to deal with people that are suffering from psychosis. And so I hope that the city council starts looking at that. I mean, we talk about mental illness, we talk about homelessness, but the city council really needs to start digging in and start funding, not taking money away from HPD, but start funding other programs to deal concurrently with the problems that HPD officers are expected to deal with, but that are just not trained to deal with.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. You know, I have this saying, you know, to think about, is it a will issue or is it a skill issue, right? And so these problems have been around for a really long time. We keep admiring the problem, we keep talking about the problem, and yet, is there the will on the city council to make sure that, like you said, that budgets are funded and that whatever is the roadblock to filling these vacancies is removed so that we can, you know, move forward. It's amazing to me that I think a year ago, the mayor took office and there were 300 and some vacancies. And I think the most recent state of the city said there's still 300 and some vacancies. So obviously we haven't made a lot of progress. I know COVID has some, you know, something to do with that, but we can't keep just blaming COVID for everything, right? It's at some point we have to fix these things. And so, and so I think the other point you made, Megan, is really good about mental health. Mental health is a big issue, and I know it's causing not only additional work for the police officers, but it's also the cause of some of the crime that we're seeing. So, Mike, are you seeing that on Stolen Stuff Away?
Honestly, it is. It's mental health and it's also drugs. So, I mean, meth, for example, is a primary factor in a lot of the crimes that we experience. People are paying for their habits. And of course, drugs, severe drug use like meth, will lead to mental illness as well. Now, not everybody is like that, but a large amount are, you know, and that is just a horrible road to take, because once they start traveling down that path, if they don't get help, it gets worse and worse and worse. And eventually you're dealing with, as Megan said, the schizophrenics, you know, the people that are having serious mental issues. So there's, like I was trying to say earlier, there's so many variables, and she brought up some great ones, but really there's so many prongs that we need to go. We need to deal with drug rehabilitation, mental health. We need to create programs that actually, once you are in jail and are about ready to get out, you have programs that can put you in a good job, right? That will prevent you from having recidivism, basically, which is when people turn back to crime after they're released. You know, it's one thing that I'm a firm believer in, for example, with the jails, we've got to protect our community. The first step is to get them away from our community. But once they're away, we need to figure out, well, how do we get it to the point where they're not going to go back into that?
Mhm.
So I think there's, like I said, there's so many variables, but we should never defund our police, and we should always look to solve these solutions, through those means.
Mhm. Mhm. Are we doing enough, Megan?
We as a community,
Yeah, the broader we.
I mean, this is what I'll say. Um, the criminal justice system is a beast. I mean, there are just so many nuances. The law is difficult. We get a higher education for a reason. And so I think if lawmakers, city council people, senators, House of Representatives, I think if they start actually talking to experts and getting opinions from experts that are in the field, you know, getting real information, then they'll start making better decisions. And I want to use this example, not that I'm not for or against any politician. I'm always glad when people step up and run. I mean, I know how difficult it is, but Sylvia Luke has taken the position that she's not going to authorize funds to build a new prison unless and until they figure out the bail system and start letting people go without holding them accountable and without imposing a bail. And I mean, I don't know who she's spoken with. I've never spoken with her, but the legislature created a task force in 2019 who issued a report in December 2019, specifically stating that we don't have the resources to let people go without bail. We just have no way to monitor these people. And yet she's going to hold the funds until we pass that bill, but we're not set up that way. So why have this legislative body appoint this investigative team to draft a report for the legislature if they're not going to listen to the opinion of the report? I mean, it seems like a waste of time. If you're going to order a report by experts, read it, follow it, do something to address the issues there so that we can start moving forward. So when you ask me the question, are we doing enough? To me, I mean, no, I think that people need to do their homework and they need to start talking to people that are in the industry, the experts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing I've learned about campaigning is that, the one thing you don't have that's always limited is time, right? So we have to be making progress every day. And I read that article as well about the funding being blocked or being dropped from the budget. I think it was $15 million that Governor Ige was asking for to continue that process. Well, I remember it was like 2014, 2015 that I heard about the fact that they were going to get started on building a new jail. Now, Honolulu is a little different, right, from other cities in that all of the jail as well as the prison system, isn't that all within the state purview? Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, our prison is in Halava, and that's controlled by the Department of Public Safety. Our jail is OCCC on Dillingham. That is controlled by the Department of Public Safety.
Mm-hmm. So just like every complicated situation in life, right, there are a number of factors as to maybe why the police aren't able to, or that arrests are being made, but they say that there's no place for them to house them, correct?
That's what the article said, and apparently that's what Sylvia Luke believes. And I hear people talk about these general ideas all the time. Oh my goodness, someone that had a bag of weed is being held in jail for a year without trial. I'm here every single day. I see cases in and out. I watch cases. I see other cases. I see my cases. That's not what we're dealing with here. We are not dealing with low-level people that can't afford bail that are being held in custody. That's not what we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
We're typically dealing with murder cases, people being held on bail that's set between $500,000 and $1 million because they took the life of somebody else. We're typically talking about reoffenders, people that have prior convictions and that are repeat offenders that are facing mandatory minimum terms of imprisonment, not probation. Those are the people that are being held at OCCC. We're talking about people that are raping underage children, sexual assault in the first degree. We are not talking about the small package of marijuana. That's what we were talking about 20, 30, 40 years ago, but that's changed. So anyone that makes that comment nowadays, to me, has not done their homework.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If I could just say something, I mean, I think the bail reform issue is a separate issue entirely. It should not be attached to that jail. We have been waiting for that. It's not only a question of putting people away for jail, but it's also about their welfare. OCCC is in horrible shape. I've heard so many horror stories about that place. So the actual prisoners are, sleeping in cramped quarters with other inmates. The facilities themselves are in a great amount of disrepair. It goes well beyond just, having a place to put them because they broke a crime. It's also their own general welfare,
Mm-hmm.
and I just think it's a completely separate issue that has nothing to do with the actual jail itself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in intrinsically, it does have some connections, but
Mm-hmm.
we need that to happen because we need a better place that can house these people. And that will take one part of the process, one of the issues we're having, it will fix it.
Mm-hmm.
It's enough. We've had enough time to talk about. We're building a $180 million stadium. Why can't we take care of a jail that will end up helping our community? So,
Yeah, agreed. One of the great things about living in Hawaii, we all have aloha, right? We're very compassionate, tolerant people, but in talking to the people in the district, they're frustrated because, first of all, we've been tolerating this and being compassionate for a really long time. And it really isn't compassionate to anyone. It's not compassionate to people who are the victims of crime. It's not compassionate even to the criminals to be housed in an area that is not safe for them or that is crowded. We have some paths forward. We spent a lot of time and money coming up with a plan to build a new jail. And then somewhere along the way, we think we're being compassionate by stopping that process or stalling it, So I agree with what you're both saying. I think we need to start looking at compassion differently and stop wasting so much time and get a move on. I would like to get your response if you have any thoughts on the CORE program. And Megan, you're familiar with the CORE program?
No, I'm not.
The Crisis Outreach Response Engagement Program that the mayor put into effect about a year now. Mike, are you familiar with that?
actually, no, I'm not exactly.
So what it is that
through EMS?
Yes, correct.
Yes.
So in the urban core areas that are high crime, and specifically it's Chinatown, downtown, and Waikiki, there's a team of medical technicians and community health workers that go out and engage one-on-one with people in the community that are generally homeless. Some of them have mental issues. And I'm wondering if we've seen if you've had any feedback on it or any improvement in it, because as I've been walking around talking to people, maybe it's a little early yet in the process, but they're concerned because they haven't seen a change yet. And they're also concerned that the type of crimes that are happening are really changing, and they're more like criminal elements that are here. And this doesn't address that. So maybe we can take a piece of that, Mike.
I remember actually the program and I remember reading articles about it, but I haven't really seen or been involved in it or interacted with it. What I do understand though is what's happening in the community. I mean, SSH is basically, if you were to, it will tell you what's happening. You can type in Chinatown and you'll come up with a list of topics that have happened within the past month, year, whatever. You can go back and track what's happened. If I want to see what happened last year, I can go check. So when it comes to places like Chinatown, where there are there's definitely an effort to try and change something down there. We've got Weed and Seed, we've got the CORE program. I honestly don't think there's been much change because I'm seeing more crime. We've had how many elderly people that have been attacked, around the start of the pandemic, during the pandemic. People
Purse
feel,
snatching.
yes, purse snatching, where the lady falls back and hit her head, an elderly woman. We've had them, we've had all kinds of stuff happen. And granted, it's not going to stop it. It's not going to stop it completely. But I think that crime has been really difficult in that area. District 6 has had a lot of difficulty with crime. I can totally understand where the citizens are coming from, because I can see it happening. And I'm sure maybe there's been some sort of impact. I mean, it's a long, slow process, like you said, but it seems like crime is all of this lack of accountability that we've had for the past 2 years. I mean, for goodness sakes, during 2020, 2021, we released so many criminals just because of the pandemic. They were just let go because they didn't want to, the whole health situation with that. They were just let go. And maybe Megan can answer this, but I don't even know how many of those have actually been to court yet. They were released. I don't even know if they've been through the court process yet. So all these criminals were just given a free pass. And now we're dealing with the consequences of that. And Chinatown and this area is part of that, a big part of it.
Megan, you have thoughts on that?
I do. To answer your question directly, but briefly, the core program is an excellent start to building our community and helping our community where they suffer, especially people that suffer from psychoses, schizoaffective disorder, bipolar, schizophrenia, whether it's organic, meaning they were born with it, or drug induced, meaning they cause it on their own, because smoking meth causes hookahs in your brain, and it does cause you to hallucinate and start talking to people that are not there. But I want to make an analogy, and I know to some people it's going to sound so silly and crazy, but when people diet, they spend months starving themselves, working out, to lose all of this weight. And if in the next 2 weeks they just let themselves go, they'll gain it all back. And I say that because for 15 years, Peter Carlisle was the prosecuting attorney for the city and county of Honolulu. He ran a tight ship. He imposed justice. He followed the law. He charged all cases from low-level crimes to high-level crimes. And then Keith Kaneshiro comes in 2010, and it takes 10 years to undo what Peter Carlisle did for the 15 years before that. I mean, it takes less than 10 years, because Keith came out of the seat a couple of years before his term ended because he was investigated. But basically, we're looking at what happened between 2010 and 2018. Okay, so it took that amount of time to create the environment that we're looking at now. What we're seeing now did not happen overnight. This is not something that all of a sudden, people are being robbed, people are using guns, 18 and 19-year-olds have guns, people are robbing elderly kupuna, and they're falling down and cracking their head on the ground and dying. This didn't happen overnight. This is a process that has been happening since 2010. My point is that we're not going to be able to fix it overnight. Steve Alm and Rick Blangiardi were voted in a year and 3 months ago. It's going to take some time. We're going to have to implement programs like CORE to start rejuvenizing our community, start getting those people out there with HPD that can deal with people that suffer from psychosis. And so this is the start to a very long road that will hopefully heal our community.
Good point and good history. And that's why also as a candidate for city council, I really want to focus on those core services that we need to make sure that they're funded, that we're not spending ourselves into a deficit on one project, and then on the other side we can't even pay for the police that we need to keep the residents safe, because that's definitely job one, is keeping people safe in Hawaii. And we don't want to see Hawaii turn into what we're seeing on the mainland, for sure. With that, I think there was one last thing I wanted to touch on, and if there's any other topics that I've missed, please feel free. But there's I wanted to touch on the mental health facilities on island, specifically in Honolulu area. Are there enough? What do we need? What are we not doing? And what are we doing well? So Mike, let me throw it to you first, and then
Actually,
Megan.
I'd like to hear Megan's answer,
Okay.
because I think she has an understanding of what's going on, because she's been dealing with it. Actually, I can come from the community's perspective on this, but
Okay, great. Megan, you start us off on that one.
Sure. You know, unfortunately, we're dealing with a lot of people that talk about what needs to be done. And for whatever reason, we don't have anyone that takes a hold of the situation and moves forward and acts. And I think that's what's happening with the Hawaii State Hospital. So the Hawaii State Hospital is a hospital in Kaneohe that is tasked with dealing with people that are suffering from mental psychoses, where they're not able to understand the proceedings against them. They're not able to assist their defense attorney in putting forth a defense. They don't understand the role of the judge, the prosecutor, or the defense attorney. And so this is where they go to get treatment so that they can become fit to proceed, so that they can understand what's going on. And, you know, we have the new wing built, but not being used because punch lists are outstanding. People are not trained. I mean, they keep going on and on about all of these things. I wish someone would just go in there and just say, okay, you do this, you do that, and fix it. I mean, I know it's not that easy, but we need somebody to do it.
So it comes down to leadership again, like what we've talked about in other situations, right?
It really does, yeah.
I mean, that's the perspective. I mean, we just had someone who took a tree branch and smashed a woman's face in front of the Kapolei police station, and he was mentally unwell. And yet we have this beautiful facility that was created specifically for the purpose of taking care of people like that. This woman's life could have been saved if somebody would have just solved that issue. And I get really emotional when I think about these things, because Megan deals with these people too. I deal with these people. One of the things you see on SSH is people's personal story. What you see on what happens in the group is only a small part of it. I deal with so many people on a face-to-face, message-to-message basis, where they tell me their story of how they've been victimized, how they're dealing with somebody. And there's plenty of people who are on the family side of the criminal, who's like, I've tried to help him as much as I can. They don't have any programs to help him. He just goes out and does this again. And I've had to deal with that, you know, just reading that. So I'm seeing it from all different sides. It's not only from the victim side. We have a problem. The mental health issues here is a huge problem. You see it when you drive down the street. I had my own, my consultant advisor from the United Kingdom who was helping me to build a track. And we were down doing a tour of the West Side to show him some of the properties in the area. And there's a couple who's walking down the street. The lady's half nude, obviously mentally unwell. And he's like, what is that? What's going on here? You know, and he's from London. He sees, you know, he sees stuff that shocked him. So I did not know Hawaii had that issue. I'm like, I'm sorry, we do have a mental health problem here, you know? So, you know, it's not always, you know, what you see in the tour ads. You know, we have some deeply, some deep issues here that need to be solved. And it would be great if we could fix them, because, I mean, we've got a great mental state hospital that's just waiting to serve the community. And yet for some reason, it's not, for whatever complicated reason, it's not happening. So.
Are we doing enough of that at the city level? Are there things that we can do at the city council level to address mental health?
Can I
Megan?
answer? Okay.
Yes.
I honestly don't know if the city has the capacity to do that. The Hawaii State Hospital is a state-run entity. The Attorney General's office represents the state, or the Hawaii State Hospital. And so that is a state issue. I mean, I guess, you know, depending on what happens at the election, you could figure out whether or not the city has the capacity to start funding programs. I will tell you, I'm a huge supporter of Habilitat. I talk about Habilitat all the time. we have to have programs that teach people how to live. It's not necessarily dealing with dual diagnosis or people that suffer from psychoses, but it's another way to start building our community because, you know, we're going through this revolving door. People that are convicted with several crimes are having kids with other people that are having, that have convictions. I mean, we have kids raising kids. We have people that are adults that don't know how to teach their kids raising kids. And so when these kids become adults, they become criminals because they don't know any other way. Habilitat is the gold standard of programs. I mean, if you have time to look into it, if you have time to go, I really strongly suggest that every lawmaker go over there and learn what Habilitat does. People take for granted they know how to get up, brush their teeth, make their bed, change, you know, plan out their day and leave their homes. But people that live on the street, we don't do that. We sleep at someone's house, we sleep on a couch, we wake up, we look for food, and then we leave. We don't have to take care of the dishes. We don't have to brush our teeth. We don't have to change our clothes. And so those are skills that, although most people would say everyone knows how to do that, you would be surprised because there's a whole population that doesn't know how to do it. And so Habilitat teaches you that. If we could use Habilitat as a role model to create other systems or programs, whether they're city or state funded, it would definitely benefit the community. But it's expensive. And I don't know if the city has the capacity for that.
No, that's really good, Megan. I hear what you're saying, and I agree. I think that as a city council member, should I be elected, that I would be more supportive of programs that provide a path forward and then a purpose, right? Than programs that are only directed towards enforcement, because then it just becomes a revolving door. Now, enforcement part's important. Yeah, but where can we do more at the city level? I think, and these are some great conversations. So I appreciate that. So with that, we're probably gonna wrap it up now. I'm gonna give you one last chance to any parting thoughts on crime on the rise in Honolulu?
Well, I mean,
Kitchens?
My message is simply anybody that will actually step up and support. I mean, I'm a nonpartisan guy, you know, I'm not really into politics that much, but when it comes to crime, I am most definitely into politics. You know, when it comes to the politics of crime and what the issues are, I deal with it a lot. You know, we've been trying to pass bills to get, you know, laws passed and whatnot. So anybody that's really trying to support that, I support them, you know, because our community is crying out for help. And I think that's really my message here is, you know, go talk to people, find out what their stories are, find out what they're going through, find out if the process actually helped them. You know, they're victims in the crime. Was their case handled? Were they given justice? Was the person that did the crime, was he helped after he served his time? I mean, there's so many different variables, and you're not going to fix it in one swoop. It's going to take decades of constant forward slogging progress, you know? And I think that's important, though, that we just have to keep trying, and we need people to keep trying. And the last thing I'd say is that if you are one of our members of our community and law abiding, is just don't make yourself a target of opportunity. You simply cannot in this day and age. You have to always keep your senses up and just be aware of what's going around and going on.
Good word. And thank you, Mike, for being with us today. Thank you for your work in the community. Thank you for the amazing Facebook, social media, Instagram group that you've built, because it's making a difference. And I think your project sounds wonderful too, your racetrack. So best of luck on that. Really good stuff.
Thank you, ma'am, and good luck with your campaign as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Megan, you have any parting words?
I just want to say thank you for having me. I'm very honored to be invited. I, like Mike, am very anti-political unless it comes to crime, which is why I stepped up last year or 2 years ago to run. So I applaud you for doing the same, because it is not easy. It's very difficult to be in the public light. It's very difficult to talk about these issues, but I just want to make myself available if you ever have any questions to reach out, because I'm always happy to talk to anybody in the community to educate and help as much as I possibly can. So please reach out if anything, if you need anything in the future.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you for your great insights on the legal side, for your years of experience here working in Hawaii, especially in Honolulu, to make this a better place for the residents here. So thank you very much. And with that, this is another episode of Nalani Live that we're going to be bringing to a close. I want to thank Megan and Mike for joining us once again, to let you know that our next Nalani Live is going to be next week, Tuesday, April 5th. So join us at 6 p.m. And in case you don't remember the time, it's 6 p.m. because this is District 6 and we're talking about issues and assets of this district. So next Nalani Live, April 5th, join us right here. You can also go to the website, vote4nalani.com. That's vote the number 4 nalani.com, where you can find out more about me, about our team, about the district, and why I'm running and asking for your vote as a candidate for Honolulu City County District 6. Coming up, we're going to have some coffee hours. Look out for those. We're also going to have some chili and rice dinners in your neighborhood soon. So I hope to get to meet each and every one of you and hear more about you and the things that are concerning you here in the district. So with that, thank you for joining us again. I'm Nalani Jenkins, and I'd like to say aloha and ahui ho.